Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Budget Cabinet meeting. My name is Councillor Millio. I'm the leader of the council, and I'll be chairing this today. I'm just going to welcome members of the public who have joined us, and of course, officers, cabinet members, and councillors who are both in the room and online. I'll start by handing over to Sarah from Democratic Services to go over the housekeeping for today's meeting.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. So agenda item 1 is apologies. I haven't had any received and all cabinet members are present. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. And again, I haven't had any through, but if any become clear, then please do let me know. Agenda item 3 is confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of February. So I'm going to defer this item to the next meeting because they were literally published 15 minutes ago. So we haven't had a chance to read those and confirm whether they're correct. So we'll deal with that at the next meeting of Cabinet. Now, item number 4 is public issues. I haven't had any petitions submitted to Cabinet on this occasion, but we do have 2 questions and 2 statements from members of the public on agenda item 6 and agenda item 7. So our first question is from Alex McKinstry. Ms. McKinstry, if you'd like to come up and read your question.
Okay, good afternoon. On the 28th of December 2025, an article appeared in the local organ of media stating the council has applied to government to increase the council tax by 7.4%. This reportedly followed some kind of solicitation from government concerning council tax flexibility. According to the budget papers, however, the council applied to government for exceptional financial support on the 6th of January 2026, and page 7 suggests this included a request to increase council tax by more than 4.99%. Given the disparity between the 2 dates, were these 2 separate letters or applications? Can you also furnish us with the substance and the dates of any replies received from government to this correspondence? And the final part of this question, will you publish this correspondence as an addendum to the papers for the Budget Council, which meets on the 24th of February?
Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. Councillor Mike Cox is going to answer that question as the portfolio holder for finance.
Thanks, Alex, and I hope you don't mind me calling it Alex because I know some people don't like being called their official names. As part of the 26-27 budget setting process and following the November 25 local government settlement, finance settlement and the Chancellor's national budget, MCHLG wrote on the 1st of December to offer exceptional financial support to BCP Council. The Council wrote to government accepting the offer on the 5th of December 2025. This request was just a request to be given the option at that stage and was communicated to all members as part of the budget presentation on the 10th of December 2025. Obviously, between then and the December, somehow it got into the local press. The application was part of the formal exceptional financial support process, was submitted because it had to be completed, and there was extensive amount of work completing that by a certain person sitting to your left. And that was submitted on the 6th of January 2026. A copy of both of these documents will be included in the addendum to the budget report as presented.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. So the second question is from Ben Smith. Ben.
Hiya. Right. Regarding Folkestone Station, will the Cabinet honour the obligation and avoid letting down the disabled, residents, tourists and businesses, including football supporters, to find a solution and consult before losing this huge investment in Folkestone? So in 2022, you gave a cast iron guarantee. Many of you were there and you voted unanimously. Money was drawn down and ring-fenced. If a mistake happened, why would be made to pay? For disabled residents, visitors with luggage or pushchairs, it's a nonsense that we're not welcoming in Boscombe and Southbourne to all. For me, it's very hard to understand why I still can't access such an important public service. A golden opportunity for a partnership project delivering a huge investment is being thrown away. Nobody doubts the financial pressures you have, but with up to £7 million of partnership investment at stake, can you find a solution in this room so everyone can hold their head up and say their actions match the words? Please honour your commitment to the disabled and all residents and visitors, including the football supporters, with the new stadium that will be the most accessible in the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And did you want to add your question into that as well?
The question was a start.
Fantastic.
Basically, you honour your commitment and your obligation.
Thank you. So I believe Councillor Hadley is going to be answering this one for you.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Ben. I have personally been very keen to see the lifts in place at Folkestone, and I've met several times with relevant parties at the station, and indeed, as you know, with the campaigners at your house. I'm very keen to see better access for all across public transport. The obligation to provide a lift is with the rail operator. The South West Railways franchise of 2017 was explicit, thanks to your work actually, that this was to be provided by 2020. MTR first failed that commitment and continued to defer, prevaricate and fail, despite interventions from both the previous and current MPs and the Council. I look back at the overview and scrutiny and full Council meetings from 2022 in supporting the need for the lifts at this and other stations. I strongly opposed the idea that the then Conservative administration commit this Council to a 50-year debt for us all to bail out the private rail operator, particularly as this does nothing for accessibility other 7 stations that serve the BCP area, which lack step-free access. All they'd committed to do, dressed up as a Green Futures Fund, was to take out a loan for the local taxpayers to pay off. The interest rates are now far higher than they were then, but more importantly, the crisis in SEND funding has grown enormously. Although we had at face value good news this week, the reality is that a further £38 million of debt from SEND is now due to come onto our balance sheets as a result of the announcements this week. There is still significant uncertainty about large further costs in the period from now until 2028. We just do not have the money for this project. It was a folly from an administration who are reckless with all of our money. I wrote to Lord Hendy, Rail Minister, and we met with Lawrence Bowman of SWR and his team yesterday. We have done what we can to get those who are responsible for the railways to continue this important project, and I'm very keen to continue to press for it. We will continue to work with parties to seek an appropriate way to fund the project, but taking out additional loans at council taxpayers' expense is not achievable at this time.
Thank you. And we have a second question from David Redgewell. Is he in the room? Oh, sorry, another question, statement. Sarah, if you could read it out, please.
So, statement from David Redgewell. As a passenger with reduced mobility and a member of Arriva cross-country train access panel for equalities and diversity, with train services from Bournemouth Central to Manchester and the North, many passengers travel onto local stations and pull by South Western Railway. In 2022, a lift was planned to be provided by Network Rail Folkestone Station with the Department for Transport and BCP Council. We understand BCP Council is proposing to withdraw the £10 million grant in part funding access for all fund. With Dorset Council now taking forward Dorchester South Station, lifts are required at Parkstone and Branksome Hamworthy. As a wheelchair user, I asked the council to talk to the Department for Transport, Lord Peter Hendy, Railways Minister, local MP Tom Hayes and MD Lawrence Bowman, South Western Railway, to find a way forward and not to cut the budget today. Thank you.
Thank you. So that closes our public issues part of this meeting. Agenda item 5 is recommendations from the overview and scrutiny committees that are not otherwise on the agenda. I'm just going to look round and see if any of our chairs have anything that they wish to support. Can't see any indications. Thank you. So on to the bulk of this meeting. We do have 2 items here. They are linked, but they're also separate. So I'm going to allow for the debate to go. If we want to talk about Folkestone as part of the budget, I think we need to keep it within the realms of the budget and then actually discuss Folkestone separately under agenda item 7. So we're going to start off with the budget. Councillor Cox is going to be presenting and proposing the item. Is there a councillor who can second this one, please?
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Over to you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Leader. And once again, I really want to thank the huge amount of work that Adam Richards and his team, led by Nicola Webb and Matt Filmer, have put into this budget and the report and all the appendices. It's a mammoth task, not helped, of course, by the usual last-minute changes by central government. In fact, this is the latest it's been for the last 10 years. And so I think with that and the exceptional financial support package, I don't think Adam Richards had much of a Christmas this year. So I want to thank him personally for that. The council has led an open and transparent budget process to date, involving extensive public consultation, engagement with partners and the business community, and a detailed scrutiny by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee the other day. Now, contrary to Councillor Beasley's fiendish mind, there is no secret plots. There was no deals with ministers in corridors, no backroom deals. We were invited, as I've just said before, to apply on the 1st of December. We responded on the 5th of December, and we briefed all councillors, that is those who bothered to turn up, on the 10th of December, and it appeared in the Echo shortly afterwards. After carefully reviewing the application form, we completed it and we submitted it on the 5th of January. We have been completely open and transparent about the council tax flexibility, which was on offer. That's a universe away from the scheming and the closed doors from the previous administration, which took place over the beach hut proposals. So this year's budget is a story of many parts. Until a few days ago, we had the continuing abomination of what is known as the funding of SEND services. Keeping debts off balance sheet while deliberately underfunding a statutory service was deceitful, dishonest, and was a disgrace. In BCP, the proverbial Rubicon was well and truly crossed, with the accumulated deficits from SEND now dwarfing the council's reserves. The government previously decided that we could just borrow and saddle the council taxpayers with millions of pounds of interest. Borrowing for day-to-day expenditure was supposed to be a red line, clearly only in certain circumstances. The new government committed to returning SEND to a system of financial sustainability in 2025. That didn't happen. However, to be very fair to them, at least we now have a plan. The government will take on SEND costs from April 2028. They will pay off 90% of the accumulated debt at March 26 at the end of the year, if, and it's a big if, they approve the local SEND reform plan. We can only assume that they will do the same for the additional deficits which we will incur in 26-27 and 27-28. At the 31st of March 2028, the statutory override will cease. The balance on any SEND debt will be BCP's liability, and that we have estimated to be £38 million, which again dwarfs our current reserves. On the one hand, government has provided us with resources such that we can add back the interest costs that we were incurring on SEND, which will be circa £15 million over the 2 years ended March 28. But on the other hand, they have landed us with a £38 million black hole to fill in 2 years. Last year, we had a general fund balanced over 4 years, despite being landed with £11 million worth of additional costs by the government in the form of national insurance and higher national living wage, for which we were never compensated for despite assurances. After last year's breach of trust, we now have another raid by central government on the resources of BCP and other southern councils. A raid made worse by one Labour MP after another putting press releases out to lie to the public that we were getting more money. Simply not true. The unfair funding review, as we like to call it, will strip BCP of £15 million a year by 2028 of government funding and grants, while we are still saddled with that £38 million debt. In this budget, we have a choice. We can devastate local services valued by residents by cutting libraries, by cutting lifeguards, by cutting leisure centres, or we can accept the government's offer to increase the council tax by an additional 1.75%, partially restoring the disastrous decision of the last administration to waive over 2% in council tax revenue for this council. Raising additional council tax at this time is not a choice any of us want to make, least of all me. However, our primary duty as councillors is to provide statutory services to some of the most vulnerable children and adults in our community, which is sustainable. The poorest are protected by exemptions, and we must ask those with the broader shoulders to take some of the burden. We have decided to accept the offer to increase council tax by an additional 1.75%, and so the council tax will go up by 6.75%, 6.74% actually. BCP will still, nevertheless, be below the national average for council tax. It will still be over £100 less than what council taxpayers are paying in Dorset, and the increase will be a fraction of what was wanted by the last Conservative administration in Hampshire, which was 15%. We will be implementing £14 million worth of further savings set out in Appendix 5A, a significant proportion of which were mostly increases in fees and charges and efficiency savings, and which have all been agreed without comment, I believe, from scrutiny. We will provide an additional £9.2 million of extra resources in children's services and an extra £11.5 million in wellbeing services to cover the demand and inflationary pressures on both of those services. There are key assumptions in this budget, which include a 2.8% pay increase, utilisation of the one-off business rate collection funds to deliver regeneration activity, and to continue to try and externalise the Russell Coates Museum. The risks we face are significant and are well documented in the Section 25 report by the Section 151 officer. There are contingencies and provisions and reserves to deal with these risks that we face. We mess with these at our peril. The Three Towns Alliance budget continues to protect our cultural and community development. We continue to invest in our highways, our street cleansing, our toilets, our lifeguards, and we continue to modernise the fleet and make it more climate friendly and create local action plans for green energy. Colleagues, let us not forget what we inherited less than 3 years ago and what we have achieved so far. We inherited a best value notice because of reckless budgets and risky assumptions. We removed that in record time. We inherited a children's services rated as inadequate, with underinvestment and inadequate priority for improvement. Together, we achieved what few other councils have, a 2-level improvement to good. We inherited a big plan designed to soothe egos and promote political ambitions. This was replaced by a corporate strategy, which puts people and places at the heart of our services. We inherited a failed regeneration company, now replaced by a fully funded in-house team, concentrating on getting the basics right. And we inherited an underinvested homeless strategy, which had over 100 families staying in B&B accommodation, where we now have none, and none for over 12 months. A groundbreaking achievement, the envy of many other councils in the country. We also now have a social housing department, one of the top rated social housing departments in the country, and an improving SEND services, all independently verified. This is what happens when you start putting the basics right, and that's what we have done. In 2024, we set a budget which rescued the finances of BCP councils from the Conservative budgets addicted to drawing £30 million a year from reserves. It was a tough budget, and we're still delivering on it. This budget will continue to add to reserves, deals with fundamentals, and rejects gimmicks so beloved by the last administration. I would ask Cabinet to approve the decisions laid out in these papers and the addendum which was published, I think it was late last night, it might be this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I'm going to first invite Councillor Salmon up as this was considered at overview and scrutiny on Monday night, and then I'll open it up to other councillors in the room and then to Cabinet. So, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Leader. So, the Overview and Scrutiny Board examined the 2026-27 budget proposals on Monday this week. I suppose I could best characterise the circumstances around the budget scrutiny as somewhat breathless, in that, for reasons entirely outside the control of this council, the full facts underpinning the budget were only communicated to BCP by the government a matter of hours before the meeting, and to members of the board just 13 minutes before the meeting. On the other hand, the ONS function of this council has made serious and sustained efforts now over several years to engage in meaningful and impactful scrutiny of the budget. Each year we have reviewed and revised our approach in an attempt to ensure that we can fulfil our critical friend role robustly, with the aim always of doing the best that we can for those who live, work and study in BCP. What has become apparent, I think, to all of us in that time is that the financial situation of this council, and so many other local authorities, is so constrained by external factors that there are very few, if any, opportunities for positive decision making. Everywhere we turn, every avenue we explore leads us back to the same answer, that there is already no money for that, or if money is found, there is already a queue of demands in place that it must be used to meet. Our chosen focus as a board this year, in terms of the budget paper, was to look in detail at the schedule of savings put forward by each council directorate, and corporate directors attended the meeting to take us through these and answer questions. This approach provided a level of assurance that the savings proposed have been designed to minimise impact on residents, although I remain concerned about deliverability, given the actual outturn figures for the current financial year, which have shown a consistent overspend each quarter. It was certainly useful to hear from our Chief Executive about further spending control measures that will be put in place in 26-27 to tackle this. What the board was frankly unable to do, given the timing of the final settlement announcement from the government, was to really grapple with the impact of that announcement on the budget and on the MTFP, which will clearly be profound, as we've heard a bit more about this afternoon. If I may make a personal comment, it is very disappointing to me that the proper functioning of ONS has been so thoroughly undermined by the delays to the final announcement this year. The board makes one formal recommendation to Cabinet in relation to the budget setting process, which relates to the public consultation exercise. The recommendation is that the questions asked in the budget consultation be reviewed to ensure that they are relevant to the choices which need to be made in the 27-28 budget setting. This relates closely to a significant piece of work that a working group within the ONS board has undertaken over the last year around consultation in general, the outcome of which will be reported at our next board meeting on the 23rd of February, and I would urge colleagues to have a look at that report when it's published on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. What we will do is, during part of the debate, we'll discuss the consultation as well and include some feedback that we can give to overview and scrutiny. I'd like to ask councillors who are not on Cabinet if they wish to speak on this item, please. No indications in the room, and I can't see any online. Okay, anyone on Cabinet? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. I must admit I expected some contributions from outside Cabinet, but so surprised to be speaking quite so early. So first of all, there's a few things I want to say. The first thing is I would like to add my thanks to Mr. Richards and his team for amazing work in probably the most, I don't know, possibly the most challenging circumstances ever surrounding a budget, a local council budget. It's some farewell, I would say, for Mr. Richards, having gone through that. I'd also like to pay tribute to the Deputy Leader, who is a really reassuring, steady hand on the tiller. Why are you frowning at me? And I think he's done a tremendous work on the political side of things. So thank you, Mike. I'm obviously not going to cover all the extensive ground that Councillor Cox did, but I would simply say two things about the budget overall. One is, of course, putting the council tax up above 4.99%. Nobody wants to do that. However, my second point is, to me, the most important thing about this budget is the protection of some of our most vulnerable services. And I'll come to, unsurprisingly, one of the areas of my portfolio, which is non-statutory, and that is culture. And culture has already been referenced by Councillor Cox earlier on. I am immensely pleased and proud to be able to support this budget that protects our cultural funding for our cultural partners and indeed our libraries. To me, two of the most important things that we do. And that comes at a time when so many other local authorities are not able to protect those services. And I think that shows our forward thinking and our commitment to culture in all its forms. As I've said on any number of occasions, and people are probably bored with me saying it, our cultural sector is one of our greatest assets economically, socially and creatively. And it plays a vital role in all our communities and for all our residents. So can I thank everybody for their support for culture? I would particularly like to thank my Cabinet colleagues. I'd also like to thank the Chief Operations Officer, Glyn Barton, and his team, particularly Helen Wildman, for their work in ensuring that the cultural budget is intact. And I'd also particularly like to thank the Chief Executive, actually, who has only been with us 6 months, but he has already made it quite clearly an absolute cultural champion. So thank you for that. And it is noticed not just inside this council, but across the cultural landscape. And I'd also surprisingly like to thank Councillor Canavan, who described me to my face the other day as a cultural lovey. That is one of the nicest things anybody's ever said about me. So thank you very much. Just being a little bit political before I wrap up, I was quite angry when I read in the esteemed organ of media, otherwise known as the Daily Echo, some comments about the budget by the Leader of the Opposition, who I see is here, but obviously didn't feel able to contribute. And I wanted to pick up one or two things that he'd said in there, in his response. And I'm assuming he's been quoted correctly. I have no reason to doubt otherwise. He talks about in this administration, the countless examples of money being wasted, such as expensive consultations costing thousands of pounds. So I think the Leader of the Opposition must have forgotten about all the consultations that were done in the administration of which he was a part between 2020 and 2023. He also talks about, and I quote, the creation of a second planning committee so that political allies, so I'm assuming political allies like the Christchurch Independents, can receive payment for chairing these often cancelled meetings. Can I just point out that actually in the administration which he was part of, 5 councillors were enticed to walk the floor for £10,000 non-existent lead member jobs so that the administration could put a vote of no confidence in the previous administration. So I think that just, one ought to just remember that. And then, quoting again, even more shamefully, the approval of increases in councillors' allowances, which I think also happened under the previous administration. But obviously, if that's such a shameful thing, I'll be pleased to hear that Councillor Beasley hasn't taken his increase in his allowance. And then the final thing was the quote, and this did make me laugh, when such vanity projects are being pursued. Vanity projects, I mean, future places, beach hut budget, I don't know, goodness knows, barbecues. So I felt I just couldn't let my opportunity go to just point out the sheer brass neck of the leader of the opposition in criticising what I think is a difficult, challenging, but ultimately robust and great budget in terms of protecting public services. So I think I'll leave it there, Leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I think it's clear our current financial challenges are largely the result of the millions of pounds withdrawn by the current government. I can see these cuts have severely impacted our budget and have forced us to make difficult decisions to maintain the services that our communities want and need. And it seems to me that for this council and others in the South East and South West, the government's fair funding formula is anything but fair. Why else are we to receive less cash resources in each of the next 3 years than we received in 25-26? But the biggest threat to the financial stability of local authorities like BCP Council has been the rising need and cost to support children with special needs. Now it looks as though we'll receive a grant for some of our resulting deficit. However, that will still leave us, I'm told, with 38 million to find before 2028. But what's really infuriating is this entire situation from the start is all due to external factors beyond our control. Sadly, I don't see we have any other option than to make difficult choices to ensure a legally balanced budget. My concern, as always, is for any residents on low incomes, and I need to point out that we have not made any cuts to our discretionary rate relief, despite this being a non-statutory service, and that's solely because we want to help protect our most vulnerable residents. I have to support the recommendations. Unfortunately, I don't see there is any alternative. But lastly, I would like to thank officers for this report, which clearly spells out our financial situation very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Leader. To a certain extent, I don't really need to speak here today, but may I say, as a former teacher, when I hear people repeating back to me things that I said in a previous lesson, it fills my heart with joy. And the fact we've had a question answered by the portfolio holder to Transport, who is explaining the system in SEND, it is, means my work here is done to a large extent. But I want to speak about just a bit more detail about my personal vanity project, which is making sure that we have a good things in place to support our children and young people. Just to point out, we have made great progress over the last 3 years. You mentioned the Children's Social Care report. SEND is the issue that we really need to look at the moment. We have moved from, in the last 3 years, widespread systematic failings, is what the CQC Ofsted report said, to a place where they call inconsistent. Now, inconsistent isn't good enough yet, but in the report it does say that we are doing many things well. All we've got to do is make sure we always do that all the time. So the deficit, this SEND deficit, isn't the fault of this administration or the officers that work in this administration. They've made a vast amount of progress. A huge amount of work's been done. But one thing I would say, it's definitely not the fault of the children, young people and families who rely on the SEND service. and that's the only thing that worries me when we talk about this and the effect on the budget, that they are not at fault. You know, they are entitled to an education which is suitable for them. And it's a system that's been put in place which has been letting both us and them down. I just wanted to pick up something that, that the the deputy leader said about the grant. I've read a bit more of the details, and it's always, you know, we say the devil in the detail. It says, the government says that the allocation of the High Needs Stability Grant will only be paid once a local authority has developed and submitted to the Department of Education a local SEND reform plan, which is then approved as meeting the required criteria. We expect the local reform plans to be developed collaboratively with local area partnerships, including schools, health, early years settings, and post-16 providers. Now, of course, we can do a lot of work on this, but of course, we need those people to work with us. So this isn't totally under our control. I would say that a huge amount of work is being done and has been done around this. However, the required criteria, we don't yet know what those required criteria are. Hopefully when the SEND white paper is published, and we've got some ideas what was in there, but we don't know the detail yet. You know, the work we're doing, I'm so hoping is in line with what the required criteria are, so that we can do that. But just a little word of warning that it could still go horribly wrong if we don't know what those criteria are. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. A couple of things from me. I wanted to thank senior managers actually, because I think, you know, there's been various thanks, but you know, the budget setting process takes quite a long time, and a lot of that is asking some serious questions of all the managers across the organisation in terms of where they can make savings, how they can imagine their services better, and how they can work that through. And obviously, working that through also takes a lot of effort and personal effort and intellect. And sadly, you know, because you have presence on Teams, I can see how late some of those guys are working, and they do work late into the night very regularly, and that's not great for their health, but it does show an enormous commitment to this council, which I think is important and not seen externally. Councillor Salmon mentioned external factors as being driving an awful lot of what we do, and I think you're right, absolutely. But one of the factors that I see, and I saw at Iford, I went to the flooding at Iford. The changing climate is having an increasing impact, and is going to be a real external stressor on our on the work, all of the work that we do. But again, I was impressed. There was somebody came up to me who apologised because she was not doing her normal role. She'd stepped in to be a bronze commander at the scene, but I knew her in her transport role. And you know, it is great that our officers again are stepping forward to do things that they need to on the ground. There were housing officers there. There were people from across the organisation stepping in to wrap arms around those people who needed them at their time of crisis. And again, that is a role of the council that's very often not seen, not celebrated. And they're doing that whilst we're asking them to make, you know, significant cuts in order to balance the budget. So I just wanted to salute all of them. I think also, you know, it is obvious that we are not alone. Around the whole country, there are councils who are in a very similar situation, and there was one that had a 10-hour meeting, I think it was yesterday, and didn't manage to set a balanced budget. You know, it is really complicated, and whatever political flavours and colours, you know, everyone is struggling. And I think, you know, we owe it to our residents to try and do the best we can. I think the work that Mike and Adam and the teams have done has done that, and literally on Monday we all thought there was great news came through the door until Adam read the small print, and it was clear that it wasn't great news, or there was a big sting in the tail, which is that the off balance sheet costs were coming on balance sheet, and that means it's real money for us and a real concern for us. So the elephant in the room, or the tiger at the door, is always you know, do we declare ourselves not to be solvent, and do we get inspectors to come in and run the council? And that would be dreadful for all of our services, dreadful particularly for our non-structured services, but actually even the statutory ones. We've managed to, well, we hope we've managed to avoid that, and clearly that's the work that the team have been working really hard to do.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, Councillor Hadley is of course right to say that we owe thanks to all of our officer corps for all of the work that's gone into the preparation of the budget. I know what a demanding task it is, but I do want to focus just for a moment on Adam Richens as Chief Finance Officer and to acknowledge the work that he puts into things and the expertise that he brings and the clarity with which he explains matters to ourselves. I think I may have said in a previous cabinet meeting, possibly in more than one, that I have some experience in 2 other councils in London over the years, and I think I've now worked with 5 different chief finance officers, and I've got to say Adam is by far and above the best of those in terms of clear presentation of the issues, making things succinct and making complex matters understandable for those who do not have accountancy qualifications. So my appreciation to him and my very best wishes to him for his future as he moves on. That said, if I might comment a little on the additional 1.75 increase in council tax that is being proposed. I'm very grateful to Councillor Cox for his explanation of how that has come about. I've got to say, I don't want it to happen. That doesn't mean I won't vote for it to happen, but it does mean I don't want it to happen. And there are 2 words that I think should be put before the phrase council tax increase routinely every time that phrase is used. And those 2 words are government imposed. Because we are in a bind and it is decisions made by central government that have led us to the situation where we need to consider not only the normal maximum council tax increase, but also the additional 1.75%. That relates not just to the current government, but it also relates to the previous government, because as Adam has reminded us in the past, and I remembered from my first year on this council, is reference to the successive cuts in government grant to local authorities, which in this area have total sum, and his figure then was £100 million a year less than before the austerity programme commenced. And that is a massive amount of money, and that cut in government grant, or the successive cuts in government grant, have led to increased council tax year on year. More recently, government decided to increase the employer's contribution to national insurance and decided not to fully compensate councils for the increased costs involved in that. And that has cost us millions, which we have had to address through a combination of savings and considering increasing in council tax. I have to say I was impressed with the fact that the Labour government did take on the issue of send debt created by the former government. But I guess, like all of us, we were a little disappointed, or I was a little disappointed, that government made the decision to pay 90% of the accumulated send debt and not the decision to pay 100% of that debt. The difference between those would be negligible in terms of government finances, but critical in terms of this council's finances. And had government made the decision to pay 100%, then we could be looking at the budget in a very different way. There's also the question of timing. Government could have decided that the payment of the 90% would take place on the 1st of April this year. Instead, as I understand it, they have indicated that the payment will be made possibly in the autumn, possibly as late as January. And meanwhile, we are paying interest on that debt. And I guesstimate that interest over that delayed period of time to be something of the order of £6 to £8 million, which exceeds the amount that we will be raising through the 1.75 increase in council tax. So yet again, it's a government imposed increase. And then lastly, as has already been mentioned, there is what Councillor Cox has rightly called the unfair funding settlement, where government decided to redistribute funding between councils to our disadvantage. And the figure Councillor Cox referred to was £15 million a year worse off by 2028, and we need to deal with that. And therefore, yet again, we have a reason why this 1.75 increase in council tax is government imposed. All of that said, I also pick up on Councillor Cox's comments that in spite of that, the council tax here will remain below the national average. It will remain £100 below Dorset Council's council tax. And I would add one other point, because we are concerned about the least well-off in BCP and the demands on their personal and home finances. The figures that are quoted in terms of the actual amount of council tax are regularly the band D figures. For those living in less sizable accommodation in bands A, B and C, the increase will be comparatively less. It's also true to say that there are those who are in much more serious financial circumstances, and this council does retain council tax relief, which can be applied for by them, and there are various different categories by which council tax relief can be obtained. I won't go through those. They're all publicised on the website. That's not something that we have to do by law. It's something that this council continues to choose to do. And I must admit I'm pleased that we do that for the benefit of the least well off. So no, we don't welcome the 1.75 increase. It is government imposed. We do still protect the least well off as well as we can. And I, with a little bit of regret, will be supporting this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I suppose firstly I would like to start with echoing Cabinet colleagues in my concern and disappointment at the lateness of the financial settlement and the level of financial settlement. I want to give some reassurance around my area's savings, which I didn't have the opportunity to do at ONS, but I'm very happy with the savings we've made. We are producing £918,000 worth of savings this year, which as a directorate and as a percentage of the council is really punching above our weight, which is really, really good from the team. And I really want to thank the team for all the work they've put into it. £760,000 of those savings are really down to our successes as a department, which is really, really good. Firstly, the £385,000 that we're able to save in emergency accommodation placements and B&Bs, because we've managed to get managed to increase our prevention activity and managed to provide more temporary and better forms of temporary accommodation for both single households and families, as well as an increased level of grant funding that we've got, and we've got that because government and MHCLG see us as a leader in this sector. So I think it's really positive, our savings, if that can be said. I mean, obviously we would really appreciate the £760,000 to do other things with, but I think it's a good position to be in. I suppose actually one of my biggest concerns with this budget in general is that it is our Section 151 officer's last budget. I think he's been a real asset to the council, both this council and its predecessors. He's always honest, robust, and very objective. And And I think that's really, really important to having a Section 151 officer. It's up to us as politicians and as councillors across the board to bring that subjectivity. But Adam has always given his honest and very firm opinion on a number of different things, and it's always been really, really important. But he's also managed to provide us at times with solutions and options. And so, yeah, just really appreciated, and it's big shoes to fill. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just had a few comments to make on this budget proposal. We've got the responsibility of being in administration to actually sort of deliver a balanced budget, and I look, there's often the luxury of opposition, isn't there? And I noted what Councillor Martin said, and I noted that article in the local press as well. So I thought, let's have a look, see what opposition groups are suggesting. Are there any good ideas there? And as Councillor Martin mentioned, I looked at what the Leader of the Opposition suggested, and I quote about examples of money being wasted, such as expensive consultations costing thousands of pounds. Councillor Martin mentioned this, but I think I'll have to remind the Leader of the Opposition, who was previously a council leader and should be fully aware of this, that these expensive consultations, some of them are an absolute legal requirement and statutory requirement that consultation must occur on certain things, particularly around health, around environment, those sorts of things. And many of them are due to the common law doctrine of legitimate expectation. So they must occur, otherwise we could face legal challenge for not doing them. This council does public consultation when it's legally required to do public consultation. That's an expensive thing to do, but I wouldn't call that waste. Avoiding that is not wasteful, because avoiding that lands us with massive legal bills and lands us in court. So just wanted to remind the Leader of the Opposition about the legal requirement to actually do that. And he talked about countless examples of waste. Well, if he can come up with one that's actually a legal requirement, then I'd love to see all these other examples of waste that he talks about. And then actually we had some Reform colleagues talked about the years of burning through reserves. They actually said, this budget and this council tax increase is the result of years of burning through reserves when there wasn't the money to deliver it. And I had to step outside and wobble my head a bit, because I just thought, I thought they voted through that burning through of reserves. They were part of the administration between 2020 and 2023, which burnt through those reserves. And now they're criticising this administration for what they actually voted through. It just begged belief. And I just think that just shows that actually opposition groups, and I'd love to see if there are some alternatives and I'm happy to sort of discuss those, but they're as stuck as we are in terms of finding options to avoid council tax increases. So, and they have nothing material to contribute to the decisions we're going to have to make. Just in terms of my area of health and wellbeing and adult social care, as colleagues will be aware, is one of the most expensive parts of the council, is where a vast majority of our council tax goes, is funding and adult social care services and health services. And I'm really pleased to have had the support the last couple of years of Cabinet colleagues, that we're not just saying we can't afford to do that, stop doing this, stop doing that, stop this service, stop that service, let's save money by not doing that, not providing that service to the public. We've actually trusted our adult social care colleagues to actually strategically shift how we actually run adult social care and how we do it, through our day opportunity strategy, through extra care housing strategy, through our fulfilled lives transformation programme, through our future care strategy, and most recently through our adult social care prevention strategy. That actually, if you want to manage the cost of those statutory services, you've got to have a strategic approach to changing how you work in those spaces, and that's what we're doing. And I'm really grateful to colleagues that, we've had some difficult discussions, and they've supported that approach to delivering, to managing our finances within the adult social care area, and it's working, and it is going to bear fruit over the coming years. Now, I've been a councillor for almost 20 years, and previously a opposition finance spokesperson, and actually the first year of BCP Council was the finance portfolio holder and presented the first full BCP Council budget in February 2020. So I understand a little bit about local government finance. And I've seen loads of budgets over those years. And to see demand pressures is not unusual. To see poor government settlements is not unusual. To see cost inflation pressures is not unusual. So a lot of what we see in here is not unusual, and we've had to deal with these sorts of things before. What is exceptional for me this year is the issue that council taxpayers are having to fund around £10 million of interest on loans that the government have told us that we've got to take out so that we can hold a deficit on behalf of national government. This is not our debt, it's national government that should be funding these services, but they haven't provided sufficient funding. They've said to local authorities, sorry, could you just hold that deficit for us? And then they've told us we've got to take out temporary loans to cover that. And then when we say, well, what about the interest on these loans? Oh, charge it to your council taxpayers. For me, that is the exceptional thing in this budget this year we've never had before. And I think the public need to be aware of that. It's not just the same as always. It's not just, oh, we've got to fill more potholes or we've got pay awards. We've got that exceptional issue on our budget to manage this year. And credit where credit's due. You know, the Labour government has now this week, you know, with the announcement, they've grasped the nettle and come up with a way through the difficulties of SEND funding. And you know, previous governments have talked about it, and things haven't happened. So actually, credit to the Labour government that they've come up with a plan and something that we can work with. You know, it's not going to deliver everything we want, and it's going to cause, you know, there's going to be pressures there. But actually, to have a national government that's actually willing to work with local authorities to work our way through this mess is a welcome change. So I really do welcome that. But the fact is that, you know, we've got these exceptional costs, this exceptional interest, that actually because of that, I don't see us having much other option than accepting the increased council tax change of 6.74%, because the other options, I think beyond that, will land us with a bankruptcy notice within a couple of years. Come 2028, I don't see, if we don't accept this, I think it will be a struggle to work through over the next couple of years to build up enough reserves and manage the other pressures that we've got to get in a financial position by 2028 when we can avoid a Section 114 bankruptcy notice. So we need this council tax increase. It's not anything that any of us particularly want to do. It's not anything that's going to be welcomed by the public, but as a local authority, we've got to remain in existence to deliver public services to our residents. And for me, this is the only way we can do that to give us a fighting chance to actually stave off bankruptcy in a couple of years when that debt has landed on us.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Herriott.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not a fan of echoing others' thoughts, as you may know, but I do think it's worth again repeating the amount of effort that the officers have put in, not only those around this table, but also the heads of service who so often have to actually really dig down and find the savings, and then we hold them to deliver that in the next year, which is getting increasingly hard. Our commercial services will be generating over an £8 million in positive contribution this year. And for those in kind of external commercial businesses, they tell me it's getting harder and harder to deliver profits in their businesses, and it's no different for our commercial teams. They're doing this, while delivering active wellbeing through our leisure centres and other services in the face of council that's so different to fully commercial operations. We continue to seek further income through making sure prices are keeping price with inflation, competitors, supply pressures, and unlike in normal businesses, we have to deliver the money back to the council to keep the vital services that we've heard all about. So if you're buying an ice cream, renting a beach hut, or having a swim at one of our leisure centres, you're contributing to this council's ability to fund the vital services you've heard about. So thank you. We could have looked for a huge increase on our parking revenue, but we felt we had to keep it at 2% in our town centres to help as best we can with the continued transition post-COVID. With higher peak demand places taking additional burden for an overall 4% that's roughly in line with inflation. We also know, though, that our business rates on the car parks are going up in another excellent move from government as a little kind of spike in the tail. We also continue working reducing costs by using one app. We're saving £150,000 a year, reducing the amount of pay and display machines, and to be clear, not removing, just reducing. We'll save a further £35,000. I feel incredibly let down by this government. I don't think anyone expected a huge swathe of money to come into local authorities in July 2024, but I don't think anyone was expecting further cuts. This has been about reallocation of funds from south to north, and you probably can't tell anymore, but I'm from the north, and my family still live there, and I do know that those councils are in need as well. But Westminster Council, where property is amongst the most expensive place to live in the UK, has a council tax that is half of what ours is. It is just not a fair and equitable way to fund public services anymore. And to me, it feels like we're given with one hand and it's taken away with the other, or at least just held far enough that we might be tempted. An extra 1.75% on the council tax for this administration left to levy, so the government can continue to say they are not raising taxes. And the options, if we don't, well, an extra 5 million to find to repay the deficit when that's called in a couple of years' time, inflating that to 43 million instead of 38. So we're essentially left without a choice, even if we're presented it as one.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. I think every member of Cabinet has spoken apart from me now, and I would agree. I think what we've had from government over the last 2 days, and it has been a real roller coaster for Cabinet and for officers as we've understood more and more about the changes to send in terms of that deficit, but also the finalisation of different councils getting flexibility within their council tax. But what has bothered me most actually happened in December, and that was the publication of the Provisional Local Finance Settlement. And it became very clear through working with our networks and understanding the situation where other councils were, is that residents of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole are losing out to councils in other parts of the country. For example, Southampton are getting a 20% uplift, Wolverhampton similar, Sunderland similar. But for us in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, it is effectively, it is quite a deep cut into our revenue grant. And in fact, it creates a gap of nearly £10 million. And what really upset me about that was not that our MPs reacted to say, how can we help? How can we go to government and raise the issues that we face in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole? Instead, they talked about core spending power, which means raising council tax by the maximum every year for 4 years. And that inability to be honest with the public about what that we were actually being asked and what is being imposed on us. It is effectively a proxy tax from government, telling local government, telling councils to pick up extra taxes to be able to fund vital services for our residents, because we are not getting the same as what we were before. I do think that we have a choice as a council. We want to protect those valuable services, things like lifeguards to keep our beaches safe, things like our community support officers in the town centres. We also have a non-statutory element in our council tax, which means that those in deprivation, those in receipt of certain benefits, get additional support with their council tax, so they get a council tax discount. And I'm really glad we've been able to keep that in, because these rises, it's an impact on cost of living onto all households, but at least those most vulnerable in our communities will continue to get that to support, and other councils have not been able to retain that and have had to raise council tax. I also see the incredible work of officers across this council every day. That includes our refuse collection teams who are out in all weathers, our social workers, our highly rated housing team, and our highways teams, and of course so many other countless people who are working every day within this council to make our community a better place for everyone to live and delivering those services that people rely on. I think this budget gets it right, balancing those pressures that we have in terms of a dip in our revenue grant, in terms of our additional SEND pressures, but it also protects those services that we want to see continue, that we really, really rely on and that we really support, whether that is our cultural spend, things like keeping our libraries open, and maintaining public services, because the alternative is we lose those public services. We would have to make those difficult decisions. And I don't think that that is the right thing to do. I think that our community want a council that is delivering for them. Just off the back of that, you know, I want to be clear that the way this process works is Cabinet will make a recommendation to full council. It's then up to other political groups in this council to bring an alternative budget. And that budget has to be approved by Adam Richards as our Director of Finance and Section 151 officer for this council. That will then be proposed, and we look at those alternative budgets and we decide essentially which one of them should be adopted. Now, if any political group wants to criticise this decision and criticise this administration, I'm challenging them to bring an alternative budget to council to protect those services that they want to see, or to cut the services that they don't want to see. Because I've been a councillor for 7 years soon, which is a bit scary, but for 7 years, in every budget we hear criticism, we hear hollow words, we hear really a huge amount of political conjecture and rhetoric, but we don't hear solutions. And I want to make sure that opposition leaders, that leaders of other political groups know that they have an opportunity to change the course in this, and that to do that they need to provide alternatives through that democratic process and justify the changes that they would like to see. I personally don't believe that you could create a balanced budget without taking an additional amount of council tax. Don't believe that is possible. The only way you could do it is to spend all your reserves, but that would put us into an even more difficult position, because all it does is delay that situation further. And in fact, you know, if I see a Conservative budget that suggests reserves, considering they spent £30 million of reserves every year for 3 years, it will just show that they are out of ideas. They will just be repeating what they have done before. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Councillor Cox, who is going to sum up, and then we will vote on this item.
Thank you, Leader. And I just wanted to thank colleagues for all the comments on the budget, many of them very accurate. And I also want to thank the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny for her comments, and you know, all of which I completely agree with, frankly. You know, I have concerns about deliverability too. You know, we are overspending in the current year, and we have to get that under control. And so, you know, I have the same concerns that she does. And certainly in terms of revising questions for the future, I'm happy to do that. I think the more relevant they are, the better, the better feedback we get. You know, there are just a few things I just wanted to summarise, and that is that, you know, there is a plan for the future. You will see from the papers that the medium-term financial plan, despite some of the improvements, is still sitting at an £18 million worth of overspend, you know, a deficit, and we need to tackle that. And certainly from as soon as the budget is passed until the next year, we will be undertaking a line-by-line examination of every budget line in order to try and find savings, and that means a complete focus on performance of each department to root out efficiencies, but also to actually improve outcomes in each department as well. I was very struck, I hope he's not embarrassed by this, but I was very struck by Councillor Kieran's response, showing that the savings that they're making in that department is due to the success of that department, and that's what we have to be doing in every single department of the council. So one of the things that we're going to be doing as well as that is to make sure that all surpluses that come about is put to reserves in order to build towards this £38 million that we've got to find. that is a huge target to go for. Will we get it? I hope so, but I'm slightly doubtful. But you never know. But we do have a backstop plan, and the backstop plan is that if we don't get there in 2 years' time with the £38 million, that we will go to government again and say, well, you've put us in this position. You've given us the £38 million worth of debt. We now need a capitalisation directive in order to, if we have to sell assets in order to pay for that, that's what we'll have to do. We'd rather you didn't do that. We'd rather you give us the whole money, but that's our plan. So there is a plan in order not to devastate services, because that's the only alternative, is to devastate local services. I think Councillor Burton's response regarding the required criteria is very, very relevant. We can sit here in our ivory towers, if that's the right expression, I'm not sure it's an ivory tower, but we can sit here and say, oh, the government are going to turn up with £165 million in a year's time. Well, I'm knowing local government and government at the moment, I'm sceptical as to whether they're just going to write a check on the basis that we write a nice plan. I think that will be quite a lot of work in order to get to that position. And so, we have to be responsible. We have to make sure the budget that we've got in front of us maintains the core sustainability so that we can deliver good services to local residents. And I think that's this budget is the foundations of that, and we have to maintain that for the next few years. So thank you very much for all your support. Thank you once again to Adam Richards and his team, and I trust you pass this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I just want to raise as well about the recommendation that we had from Overview and Scrutiny on our consultation process, and including how we can improve it next year by asking more relevant questions as part of it. I do just want to, I'm looking around Cabinet, I don't think anyone is going to object to us accepting that recommendation, and we'll be working with UK and with Overview and Scrutiny to see how that can be improved, especially for next year. And I think doing that sooner off the back of this year's consultation will give us lots of time to plan ahead for the future. Okay, so we'll take this paper to a vote, please. Can I see all those in favour of recommending this budget to Council? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, so we will move on to item 7, which is Folkestone Railway Station. Councillor Hadley is going to be presenting this report. Is there someone who can second this one, please?
I'm happy to second that one.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I wasn't actually sure whether it was me that was going to propose this one or not, because it is really a financial decision, and that's part of why it's part of the budget. We have a really difficult settlement, as has been outlined under the previous item. The report goes into significant history of the project. It started a long time ago. Ben probably tell us better than anyone when it started, because he was involved in the campaign, I think, from the very beginning, and it's probably getting on for 20 years. And I know from some of the other projects that I've been trying to do as a member of the community that it can take a very long time, a lot of effort from a lot of residents to make these things happen. And it's a huge disappointment to me that we can't support this at this time, but hopefully the paper before gives the reason why. We just have to concentrate on being responsible with our budget. I think as well, it for me it epitomises privatising public services. The company involved at MTR First made a commitment in 2017 that they would do it within 3 years. The commitment actually stated they should work with Network Rail. They thought they knew better. They thought they could get it cheaper by working with other parties. And I think I counted it went through about 6 different iterations, and each one created further delay, further costs, and of course cost of working those things up. It is a really difficult site because it's in a deep cutting, which is part of the reason that the lifts are absolutely needed, is because it's in a deep cutting and with no access to either platform. from outside. It's very similar in that instance to Branksome Station, which also has the same problem of being in a deep cutting. But Parkston has no access on the down platform, no step-free access, and it is the same for all of our stations apart from Bournemouth, and that is not fully DDA compliant either. Initially, the project was about full refurbishment. It was about realigning the bridge, because the alignment of the bridge is not great for personal security for people, and that was part of the plan. It involved significant upgrading to the reception hall, to the couple of little shop units along there that have been tatty for as long as I can remember them being there, because they are owned by South West or owned by the railway operators, and let out. And that, as time went on, that all got degraded and fell away to being a simple paint job of the station platform and hall, and not realigning the bridge because of the technical difficulties. At the same time, Network Rail have been working at that station, putting in a very significant power supply. So it was really interesting when we were talking with Network Rail, South West Rail, on Monday, that they were talking to the DNO, the Scottish and Southern Electricity, about electricity supply. I'm going, but you've just put in a whacking direct transformer, literally right next door to where the lifts are, separate arm. Part of the opportunity that Network Rail and South West Rail coming together brings is to work as one. But that's a classic case of they've been doing work which could have been enabling to this, and apparently they did look at it, but it was just felt to be too complicated to try and bring those two projects together. I think I probably, well, I suppose the other thing was that the acknowledgement we had on Monday was that it has been a very rocky and protracted journey. That they have, it seems, only stepped up to do very detailed work in the very recent past, and they haven't really been telling us about that. There was a letter came in before Christmas. It is clear from the senior responsible officer for the project that he has been involved in successful lifts elsewhere. A lot of those have relied on SIL funding from areas, one of which there's a home base that has been demolished in a big block of flats, and that's provided a significant contribution to be able to put lifts at the station. They're all suburban stations around London, I think nearly all of them. And we just don't have that at Boscombe. We don't have SIL in that area to do so. We did explore whether there was a possibility with the football club, whether they could be prevailed upon to provide some funding. There is no SIL involved in the football club to enable us to do that. So I am still hopeful we can try and find some other way to do this, but it's not going to be on the basis of taking out a loan at a time when we've got a whacking great loan just being imposed upon us, and that's the rationale, and I think the paper gives the detail.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. I'd like to invite councillors who are not on Cabinet to come and speak, please. So I'll start with Councillor Canavan and then Councillor Connolly.
Thank you very much. I thought I would bring with me a couple of visual aids. One is this report in today's Echo about the rail boss request meeting with council over cash cuts. And the other is in response to your comment on the previous item, Leader, that reference to political rhetoric. This is my Labour Party membership card. I've spent the last hour listening to political rhetoric from other political parties, so that's really rich. But coming back to the issue of Folkestone Station, this Cabinet report suggests that there is no firm assurance that the scheme is deliverable within the available budget. That is in complete contrast to what we've heard back from the rail partners. And when I say we, I'm talking about the Member of Parliament for Bournemouth East, because the rail partners are saying that they are now confident that the scheme can be delivered within the available funding envelope, but it is reliant on committed contributions, and without BCP's contributions, the project cannot proceed. So the project readiness, I think, is the other question mark in this report. But again, although Councillor Haddad is right, it's taken a long time. What we do know from the rail companies directly is that the final lift system design is underway and will be ready in March. And as again Councillor Haddad referred to, the power upgrade quotation is expected at the same time, and the contractors are currently sequencing construction with a view to starting work in the summer. So that's the feedback that we've had directly from the rail companies. So pulling the rug on this funding now is or will inevitably lead to either a complete deferral for decades, or putting this project beyond reach. Now, I know there's some reference to the increase in the public borrowing rates in this report, but we've been here before, and I'm not quite sure what Councillor Hannah was referring to about government imposed, because this is your choice. This is a political choice that you're making, not to put, it's not financially driven, it's political, because you could afford it if you wanted to, but the truth is you don't want to do it. You want to walk away from a project which was promised to the public, has been made earlier, a firm commitment to contribute towards this project in order to deliver accessibility to the public on this railway station. You're prepared to walk away from that and frankly abandon disabled people in the process. Now, at last night's cabinet council meeting, Councillor Brown made the point about this isn't our land, as though that is some kind of excuse to walk away from the project. He absolutely fails to understand the importance that this project has in terms of the wider economic regeneration of that area. It is fundamentally part of the regeneration of that area, because it will open the gateway more to be more accessible in terms of allowing people to come into Bosco and indeed to Southbourne by virtue of that improvement. So if you cannot understand or cannot see the benefits to the wider community of putting that investment in, it baffles me. It truly does, and it links, Chair. Finally, I could see the stare. To the previous item, because I have given you notice already that I will be wanting to put an amendment when this comes forward to council, still in the hands of the monitoring officer, but I've given you notice of doing that, because for me, the reason why you approached the government for more money was to support the kind of services that we want our public to enjoy. So these are your choices, but this is a choice. This is a choice that I want you to make. And I don't believe that the government were expecting you to say, oh, we're going to ask for this money, and government say, okay, well, you can have this much money, equivalent to £5 million, and for you to put it straight back in the bank without actually doing anything to support local services, because that's effective what you're doing. You're simply sticking that money back in reserves without investing it in the community. You're holding it against some future debt on for some hypothetical reason. So you indicated to me in your reply to my email, Leader, that you weren't minded to accept my change in recommendation today, which I didn't expect you to. But I will be pushing it again at the meeting on the 24th of February, because this is fundamentally unfair. It is a betrayal of trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. If anyone says we don't have transparency, I've let Councillor Canavan speak for double the amount of time that he should. So, but I feel this is an important issue. I think it's important the community and their representatives have a say on this. Councillor Connolly, if you don't mind, I'll probably ask you to try and keep it to 3 minutes.
I will do my best. I wasn't aware there was a time limit, so I'll do my best to rattle through the points I want to make. Essentially, I'm here to request, obviously, that you reconsider the proposal in the paper and that at the very least you pause this decision to fully explore the options to keep the scheme alive. I cannot overstate, and I'm not going to emphasise just how important this is to residents in the area. Now, firstly, I'm quite concerned about the argument that you disagreed with this decision to contribute back in 2022. I understand if you might have taken a different view at the time, but that was 4 years ago, and the work is due to commence this summer. So I just want to emphasise the magnitude of the decision to make that decision at this point in time. If there were some unforeseen circumstances, something had changed, that would be one thing. But I cannot see what has changed to justify the decision at such a late stage in the day. So I know rates are higher than they were then, but they've been twice what they were then since your administration took over in 2023. And they were higher last year than they are this year. The financial situation, the DSG deficit, again, not unforeseen, and something that could have been communicated when you came into control in 2023. So I really cannot emphasize the damage caused by making this decision now when they've finished the detailed design phase and are ready to start work. To my mind, to wait until the design phase is complete, the work is ready to start, will do untold damage to BCP's reputation as a partner for such work. And basically, pulling the plug at this stage will kill the scheme. And it seems time to do so. And I'm sure that's not your intent. Secondly, I dispute that BCP shouldn't bear some of the cost for this. This is infrastructure spend to benefit our residents. Now, to my mind, one of the key purposes of local government at all is to raise and direct funds to local priorities above and beyond what a national body might decide. South West Rail already are paying more than BCP towards this, and it's BCP residents that are going to benefit, as well as the local economy. And again, it's not just those with disabilities. I remember when I was pregnant. You'll remember when I was pregnant, how difficult. I had to not be able to travel on many occasions to my local station because of it. And then you start thinking about when you've got a pram. I've had to not go places. I've had people not come to me because of it. And I know local residents say they don't come to the area to shop or go shopping from there simply because of that. So I think the impact on the local economy is part of why it is on BCP to contribute to. And thirdly, I don't really understand why it's asking. It's a strange ask because it seems so in line with what I understood to be your priorities. It speaks to the climate crisis. It speaks to the challenges around traffic congestion and potholes in the area, the horrendous parking problems we have in Folkestone, the seasonal parking pressures we've all talked about. Now we've got a football stadium being built 5 minutes walk from there. I don't really understand why it wouldn't be a priority for the administration to contribute to, putting all that aside. So finally, I just wanted to say that from the way the paper is written, it's very clear that the relationship with the stakeholders has broken down. I was aware they were undertaking the detailed design phase over the last 6 months. I'm quite surprised at how that relationship seems to have changed. I remember speaking to officers in 2024, and they felt that the scheme was progressing as it should have done. And South West Rail have already contributed over 1.6 million to the design phase so far. So my request is that if this decision is going to go ahead, we are going to want to see evidence of how you have explored all the options, engaging with South West Rail, Network Rail, engaging with the Department for Transport, engaging with the football club, engaging on a payment schedule that can reflect the council's financial situation. And we really need to see the effort has been put in before the plug is pulled. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connolly. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've also am a card-carrying member of the Labour Party. I don't use much of the way of rhetoric other than to stick by the principles which I believe since I was first elected in 23, and I'm glad to see there are other card-carrying members here. And I'm glad there is so much pride in the political parties that we're members of, because we're members of political parties on the whole to serve our residents. And it says on here, my one, I've not got the 4+ decades that Patrick has. It says putting the country first on the back of my one. I don't know what it says on the back of yours, Councillor Moore, but that's what it says to me, and I take that for being putting the residents first. I've got a resident sat to my left here, in Mr. Ben Smith. I first got involved in this project when I was first elected. In fact, the very month I was elected, and the first role which I had then was to invite South West Rail to come in to an overview and scrutiny committee at that time to explain why they wouldn't hit their deadline as promised in the franchise. But the world's changed a lot since then, and it has changed, as Councillor Connolly says, as regards when the promise was made by this council, voted on by this council, that we would be the lender of last resort. And that terminology has been dropped. I've noticed in the paper, and it's been dropped since. But that's what brought South West Rail and Network Rail back to the table, so that they had that funding that they had ring-fenced, secured, and they would progress the project. And as Councillor Connolly's pointed out, the progression of the project has gone according to the schedule, and they're now at the point where they're prepared in March to make the statement that spades are going in the ground. So my appeal to you, yes, is to listen to Ben Smith on my left here, to listen to his appeal, and to listen to Councillor Connolly, not to pull this funding as the lender of last resort, but to actually look for other sources of funding, so we don't have to pull down 50 million that are not this generation, not the next generation, the generation of taxpayers down the road. That's what the last administration did. £50 million slush fund, called it the Futures Fund. That was just borrowing. So our children, and quite right, Councillor Hadley, we stood against that. But we live in the real politics of the world that we're in just now. I believe that public services should be paid for. Public services should be for the public good, paid for from the public purse. But we're not in that real politic world. But we are in the real politic world where we source funding from somewhere else rather than just going to the Public Loans Board. So I would listen to Ben here. He certainly inspired me to campaign for my residents. And these are the people that come and they contribute to the economy of the local area, and they actually be able to live more fulfilled lives, which I believe is one of BCP's promises. So just in closing, I would suggest that I'm so pleased that, Councillor Hadley, you've had meetings with the appropriate ministers. I would suggest that you have meetings with the Secretary of State and encourage your local MPs to do so. Heidi Alexander has visited the town. She understands the problems that we have here, to my understanding. But most importantly, there's an article which I read while I was sat earlier about Dorking Deep Dean Station. The DFT spokesman said, while the previous government did not progress Dorking Deep Dean, we remain committed to supporting improved accessibility at stations across the country. We are working with Network Rail to provide guidance for local authorities. Just 1 second, please, Chair. This is the quote from the DFT. We are working with Network Rail to provide guidance for local authorities to find alternative ways to progress accessibility improvements. I urge this committee to not make the recommendation, pause this decision to pull the plug, and allow council the opportunity to find other sources of funding for these much needed lifts. Thanks so much, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Okay, so I can't see any other indications to speak on this item, either online or in the room. So I'm going to go over to Cabinet now, please. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to pull one or two of the speakers up on a few matters. I also attended the meeting yesterday with South West Rail, and we asked a specific question: how much will this cost? What's the final cost? They could not tell us. So as for being in the final stages, they could not tell us how much this was going to cost. I appreciate all the hard work, and we had some good representations from four of them there, and but they could not tell us what the final cost was. Councillor Connolly made a very impassioned plea and actually asked what's changed. What's changed is the fact that last year we had a balanced budget over 4 years. We don't have that anymore. In fact, when we made this decision, our medium-term financial plan was negative to the tune of £30 million. It's now to the tune of £18 million with a £38 million loan hanging over our heads. A huge amount has changed, and we've got to do this for the long term. We would love there to be a lift. I would love there to be a lift, but from my perspective, and I'm sorry, Ben, but you got that slightly wrong. It wasn't a unanimous vote when it happened. There was one person that actually voted against it for professional reasons, and that was me. So I didn't think we should be spending all that money on land we didn't actually own. That was my personal opinion. I completely accept the pleas that have gone on. We did sit down. We did talk about alternative routes. It was made very clear to us actually during that meeting that the local MP had been to Heidi Alexander, and the answer was no. I mean, that was pretty clear to us from the meeting that we had, that she was not prepared to go that far. So I understand you, please. I understand that you've all worked very hard on it, but at the moment, I can't see any way around that we should be taking out a loan of £2.8 million to fulfil that.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I do agree that Folkestone Station is clearly not disabled friendly, and that is a huge pity. But sadly, there are also other railway stations in our area which are equally not disabled friendly. And the problem, as I see it, is that railway stations are not council assets. We don't own them. And normally, this means we cannot use taxpayers' money to improve assets which this council doesn't own. Folkestone Station, however, seems to have been made an exception to this rule. And I have to say, I wasn't really very happy about that at the time, but I did vote to fund it previously because I was told there would be additional funding from the rail operator who owns the station, which would be used not only to improve disabled access, but also to make the station more user-friendly. And given the history of this station, I thought that was very important. But sadly, the funding from the rail operator is reduced, but this council is still expected to make the station a special case and fund it. And the biggest problem is that at this time, when things are very difficult financially, and we're being asked to make some horribly difficult choices financially. So for me, this is yet another example of one of the really tough decisions this council is having to make because of all the government cutbacks. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. I've only got a couple of brief points to make. First is I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint my friend Councillor Canavan because I'm going to be a bit political, first of all. So, this, as has been pointed out, this decision was made 4 years ago under a different administration, and I'm struggling. We're told we're breaking promises, we're breaking pledges. When does a political organisation so political organisations change, administrations change, governments change, and decisions change when that happens. So we cannot necessarily be bound by a decision that was made 4 years ago under a different administration. I think that's the political reality of it. And I quoted Councillor Beasley earlier on, so I think it's only fair that I share the love and quote a Labour person. So, and that's Tom Hayes. And he says, if it does not happen, those who made a promise and then break it are alone responsible in a democracy, and I think that matters. Now, I wouldn't call that, as I've called stuff that Councillor Beesley's mentioned, as brass neck, but I would say it's a little bit rich when you look at the Labour government, which has made 13 U-turns on everything from welfare reform to digital ID to goodness knows what. Things change, decisions change, U-turns happen. That's the reality of political life for all sorts of reasons. So I think it's also worth that, bearing that in mind. The cost has been outlined, and forgive me, I can't remember if it was mentioned at the beginning about how long this would take us to pay off. I think it's 50 years. 50 years to pay back £2.6 million. And the list probably won't even be working by the time we've paid it off. That just doesn't make any sense to me. If we are going to spend taxpayers' money on investing in our communities, I'll tell you where I'd like to spend it. I'd like to spend. This cabinet put a library strategy through in October. The library strategy commits us to 24 libraries, but it also puts a warning in there that our libraries need a hell of a lot of money spent on them. Hundreds of thousands, if not more, actually, in terms of the infrastructure, the repairs that are needed. I'd rather we spend it on that. We have Charminster Library closed at the minute, as you all know, probably for a good couple of months or so, or even longer, because of the amount of money that needs to be spent on repairing the roof. And the Russell Coates Museum is in danger of not being externalised, and this is all in the public domain because we had a public meeting here about 2 weeks ago, because there's a shortfall in the funding. Now, I know that we are trying to address that, but that's another reason why we should be looking at our own property and our own assets rather than funding something else that is not our asset. And I do hear the arguments about the importance of it. I just think this is about political priorities, financial priorities. And my final point is Mr. Bowman, who I think is the Managing Director of South West Railways. He was quoted in the lots of mentions of the Echo today, but in the Echo the other day so he said, and I find it, Network Rail and South Western Railway are not in a position to provide any additional funding for this scheme. So I have a suggestion for him. So the government has allocated tens of billions of pounds to Network Rail for projects like Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade, 4 billion. East-West Rail, 2.5 billion. In terms of stations, and this is just a couple, 1.5 billion to upgrade Reading Station, 850 million to upgrade Birmingham New Street Station, and a huge spend on Euston and King's Cross St Pancras. I would suggest that taking a little bit of money from those projects and putting them into Folkestone would solve the problem overnight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. That seems to have been the way. I'm a card-carrying member of the Liberal Democrat Party, and mine actually has a picture of the late Baroness Shirley Williams on, who was a Labour minister back in the 1970s. So to those colleagues, we're not a million miles apart in where we're coming from. I use public transport, I use trains, I believe in public transport, and I believe that, all of our stations in BCP should be as accessible as we can make them. But for me, when I looked at this, I thought, well, let's look back at the business plan. What was the proposal on the table 4 years ago in 2022? And we talk about there's been a promise made by this council, promise made to the public, and particularly I picked up on the point about I can't see what has changed. Well, let's be clear, back in 2022, the promise was £1.6 million from this council towards the lifts, with most of the funding for that from South West Railways. And about £1 million of the funding from this council was for the station building and the station forecourt. And I'm going to read through in the business plan what it talks about doing. It talks about demolishing the station building, construction of a new station building, energy efficient building with remote access to the waiting room, toilet when it's unstaffed, separate night entrance with remote control access, enhanced CCTV, accessible toilet, internal heated waiting area, accessible low-level ticket office window, real-time bus information screen, ability to include community artwork, potential community room and cafe, new station forecourt, secure cycle parking, Beryl Bay, bike bay, eastbound bus stop installed, rail local travel information totem, taxi bay, rail staff parking, car drop-off point, attractive paved area, attractive lighting on the forecourt. That last bit, the station forecourt and the station bit, was to be solely funded by BCP, nearly £1 million of what we'd promised to do. When you say you can't see what's changed, that has all been axed from the scheme. None of that is due to happen anymore. We were going to be the sole funder of all those station improvements. That's already been axed by Network Rail. When you talk about this decision will kill the scheme, half of the scheme's been killed already. And I haven't heard anybody kicking up a fuss about that, about the main bit that BCP Council were offering the funds for has already been killed by Network Rail and South West Railways. The deal on the table now is not the deal that was agreed 4 years ago. They've now assumed that the 2.6 million we were going to put into the scheme, they can now just use for the lifts. All of that £1 million we were going to spend on the station, no, you're not going to get that now, but we're going to use that just to cover the extra costs for the lifts. So the deal, the promise that was made 4 years ago isn't on the table anymore anyway. So we're not breaking any promise. It's a completely different deal that we're considering now. It's solely 2.6 million for the lifts and Network Rail will paint the canopy. That's pretty much, from what I can see, what the deal is. So when you talk about you can't see what's changed, it's changed immensely. When you talk about the promises that were made before, those promises have been broken already by Network Rail and South West Railways. That's not the deal that we're looking at anymore. When you talk about the progression of the project has gone to schedule, only this one element of it, the lifts, the progression of the main bit of what BCP were thinking we were going to get from the deal is gone. It's off the table. It's already been killed. And I haven't heard people shouting about why has that been killed from the scheme already. So we've got a really difficult, colleagues have said, we've got really difficult financial decisions to make. And when we're looking at a completely different revised deal from what was on the table 4 years ago, I find it really difficult to justify with the financial position of this council.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking back actually to the debate actually when we voted on this back in 22 down at the BIC, because it wasn't actually in this building. And I remember there was an amendment brought to it, which was lost. You're quite right, Councillor Clocks did vote against it then. There were 8 abstentions as well. So it wasn't unanimous. Now, I voted for it at that time. I voted for it for a number of reasons, partly because of what Councillor Farquhar actually said at the meeting, because Councillor Farquhar was very passionate and still is about it. I also wanted to see an improvement at Folkestone Station, both the lift and what Councillor Brown has discussed, because Folkestone Station does have a history, and without wanting to go into details about that, it's a place that does need to be made a nicer place. Now, unfortunately, as Councillor Brown says, a lot of these alterations are not on now, and times have changed. At the point, I thought, and I was uneasy, but it's not a council-owned asset, and it's spending money on something which we would have no control about. Once that work had been done, it could be undone, it could be not serviced, and we would still be paying that loan. I thought it was affordable then. It isn't now, because of the reasons we heard in the budget paper. So you know, and it's with regret. I would love us to be able to spend money on that sort of thing. But so it's with regret. I would say that yes, times have changed, and we can't no longer afford it. Now, you know, one other thing I would say is, and this is one of the big differences, I think, many of the differences between this administration and the previous one, we are looking to the future. We want to make decisions now which will make BCP and future administrations more sustainable, as financially sustainable. We're not saying let's do what we do now and then the next administration and the one after can worry about it, because it won't be our worry. We are saying that we need to leave this administration with whoever takes over next time and the time after in a financially secure situation, for the benefit of the people of BCP. So, you know, the argument about putting some money into the bank, we know we have to build up our reserves again to a level which we never know what might happen. And those reserves are there for that reason. So, yes, I did vote for it last time. Now it's different. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, a quick comment that Councillor Canavan referred to my phrase used in the previous item about government imposed, and could I clarify that when I said government imposed, it was specifically with reference to the council tax increase, and I still believe that that phrase is fully justified. When it comes to this particular issue, first of all, I have to defer to Councillor Brown's expertise on the background, the original scheme, and the compromises that have already been made, because I was not a councillor at that time. That said, I do have some sympathy with the concerns that have been expressed by the councillors who've spoken and by Ben. The station not only serves the immediate area in Folkestone, but it does also serve residents in Southbourne, and my ward is West Southbourne, so there are my residents who might also reasonably have been expecting this to come to fruition. So I expressed disappointment on the part of them as well. That said, I also accept financial reality, and I understand the situation that this council is in, as we debated at some length in the previous item. My understanding is that improvement to railway stations is not part of the council's core responsibility. It is for central government and Network Rail to fund. And Councillor Martin has already indicated that if we did have spare money, which we don't, there are other priorities that are part of the council's core responsibility that we would want to spend that money on. He's mentioned his, I would support his, but I would add to that we have a play strategy, which is critical to the enjoyment of families and children and to their well-being. And we have got millions that we still have to find in order to fulfill that play strategy. So there are competing issues which are part of this council's core responsibility. So given that the funding should actually be coming from central government and from Network Rail, I would encourage in particular the card-carrying members of the Labour Party to lobby our Labour MPs to lobby the Labour government to provide the funding which is required, which is dwarfed, as has been indicated, by sums being provided for other towns, other railway stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. I'm going to go to Councillor Herritt, and then we'll go back to Councillor Hadley to sum up. Councillor Herritt.
Thank you, Leader. I don't have my card on me, but I occasionally carry one, but I don't have a wallet anymore, to be honest. So I think in all of this, we've missed a vital point that no one's really mentioned, and that is the reason that the council ended up in this situation is due to multi-billion-pound companies failing to deal with a commitment they made in 2017. Those multi-billion-pound companies held that franchise through into May 2025, well into the period that the council were on the hook for this money. First Group, part of that, their turnover last year was £1.37 billion. They paid out £30 million to shareholders and they bought back over 90 million in shares. MTR's profit last year was £700 million, and the taxpayer has been left holding the baby and taking the criticism, while those who initially abandoned those commitments made to win a commercial contract with the government have left the council and indeed the government on the hook for the money. And taxpayers would be left paying for this debt for 50 years, long after those lifts have failed. And those who initially failed that have just kind of disappeared with, I assume, £1 million multi-million pound pay packets. And as for the council honouring their commitments, we were promised that national insurance would be fully covered in 2025. That didn't happen. We were promised funding for a SEND school. That's gone. And we were promised a fair funding settlement that took into account coastal and seasonal pressures. Well, we've heard today how that went. So frankly, if the government were able to keep theirs, maybe we'd have been able to as well.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, there's an awful lot in there. I want to start by going back 50 years, because no, it's probably more than that, sorry. When I was 3.5, I remember going with my mum, and we went through Folkestone station, and she had 3 children in tow. My sister was in a pram, and she persuaded because it was a manned station at the time, she persuaded them to use that lift. So I've been in that lift. I understand, Councillor Connolly, exactly the impact for mums with young families, and as I say, it's a very, from that age, it's a very early recollection, but I am pretty sure that we probably shouldn't have been in the lift because it was probably a goods lift even back then, but it was working 50 years ago. And absolutely, as Councillor Herritt said, it's an obligation that was completely shirked. And part of that was that the certainty about that we were given about the fact that they had the design nearly complete, and that they were going to start work this year. I found that from the press release from the MP for Bournemouth East. We hadn't been told that. We were just expected to stump up 2.4 million. When we quizzed them about the money, they said, yeah, we'll need the full sum. But they couldn't tell us how much it was going to be because they haven't yet finished all that work. So this idea that it's all complete, it's all ready to go, I'm afraid that's just not the case. And yes, absolutely, the relationship has probably broken down because they didn't put any effort into the relationship. We were on, I think, the 5th iteration of the design of the lifts, and that's where we were in terms of confidence. Was, well, it's yet another design. They're going to come along again. They came along in the autumn to say, oh, actually, we're standardising all our lifts. We're changing the design away from what you had. The only reason that we had Lawrence Bowman come down and see us was because we threatened to withdraw the money. And that is actually shocking, but that is the nature of, sadly, the nature of the relationship. I stood on Folkestone Station several times with Tom Hayes, with the MP for Bournemouth East. I don't carry a card. I'm an independent councillor, and I'm happy to work with anybody. And I try and be honest and helpful with anybody. And I hope councillors, appreciate that. But I stood there with him and with Richard Pincroft, who's our lead officer on this, and we were quizzing them about what's the timeline. What are the steps? And we weren't getting anything. And it was actually Richard that came up with, okay, so if you're doing this, this, and this, and he came up with a timeline, and we messaged that back to them after the meeting. And Tom was pushing them hard, and that this was at the time before MTR first disappeared with all the money. And we have tried to maintain that relationship. We have tried to bang on the door. But it seems that they're much happier to have photographs taken with the local MP than perhaps to engage with the people who are supposed to be funding the scheme. So that's a real challenge about that managing that relationship. DDA compliance is an obligation on the operator. Our bus companies are having to invest heavily in their bus fleet in order to make them DDA compliant. Local coach companies are going out of business or having to throw away their coaches because they're no longer DDA compliant, and it now applies to them as well as to public service vehicles. The rail companies, over a huge length of time, have been failing to do that. The issue that Councillor Martin raised, I think it was, around the various rail services, I do have to correct slightly. So Lawrence Bowman is the head of Network Rail Wessex and South West Railway, and part of that is bringing the two together, which is a great thing in terms of running the railway as one, and will bring some economies out. And he's got a difficult role. So he's not in control of all those other pots of money elsewhere in the country, but Network Rail is, and there is something about it's a very small thing. There are many stations around the country that are not DDA compliant, and it is a shame on our railway network and the Victorian infrastructure that is so. But as I've already suggested, we don't have actually one railway station in BCP that meets those DDA compliance. And the rail operators are increasingly reliant on development and on contributions from local authorities through SIL or Section 106 in order to fund the railway schemes. And that's not what we've got here. That's why we were having to look at funding. we did get reassurances on Monday that they continue to plan. That they weren't going to walk away from that meeting and stop all work, and that was helpful. And as I said, when I spoke, I'd be really keen to see this go forward if we could find a way. But taking out a huge debt that will outlive the lift is not the way that we can do. So I'm really grateful to members. I know people are passionate about it. I've been with them shoulder to shoulder trying to move this forward over quite a considerable time, and I'm really sorry to get to this point. But it's part of what we have to do, and I think it is about us being responsible in with the finances of this council, not just about getting to the next election, but getting the place so that we don't have essential services to people around the area. The plan for play, we managed to secure 2.9 million for phase 1 of, but the phase 2 and phase 3, as Councillor Hannah said, is not yet funded. If we fund the lifts, then we have to make other difficult choices about what else we can't fund, and that is where we find ourselves. And I think that is why the recommendation is being made.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Okay, so this is for a vote and recommendation to council. Can I see all those in recommendation? All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, so we will just finish the agenda. We have item number 8, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. Chief Executive, anything to report?
No urgent decisions have been taken.
Thank you. And then agenda item 9 is the Cabinet Forward Plan. And of course, the latest version is included as part of the agenda. So I will allow councillors to take a look at that themselves. So all that's left for me to do is to close this meeting. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has attended today, to their contributions. They are valued and listened to. And as we get into our full council meeting to set this budget, I don't think any of us are expecting an easy ride with that. And I think it's really important that we do listen to each other as part of that process. Thank you.